I need to make a few notes. Perhaps I should use my cursed notebook. Yep, this is my cursed notebook. Hideous, isn't it? But it was really easy to make. And in this video, I'll show you how I did it. Now, as you may or may not be aware, I'm a big fan of recycling. I like using old materials to make art rather than buying new art. It's one of the reasons I haven't invested in a 3D printer. Why would I want to put more plastics back into the environment when there's so many plastics out there that need using up? So, what I've done in the past is I've used a lot of old materials that people would normally throw away, you know, like plastic bottles, containers, things like that, to make all sorts of things. I mean, I've done things like monsters. And I've made trains and scorpions and owls and bugs and whales and seahorses and all sorts of things out of junk. I've made small sculptures that incorporate not only polymer clay and air dry clay, but also bits and pieces I found in my rubbish boxes. I've also even recycled paint. Now, I paint mostly with acrylics. And acrylics are a form of plastic. So when the acrylics dry on your palette, they dry into a hard plastic form. Now, the palettes I use are polypropylene, which is a kind of plastic that things don't stick to very easily. You'll know if you've ever tried constructing anything using polypropylene, it's very hard to get things to stick together. You've got to sand it or heat it or do all sorts of things to make it work. Otherwise, glues just don't stick it together. But it means that the paint, the acrylic paint, once it's dried, can be peeled off. And over the years, I've done a number of things with it. As you'll know, if you've read any of the art essays I've attached to sort of blogs to this, the posts on this YouTube channel, you'll know that I used to teach art to both young people and to retired people. And a lot of that was about rebuilding their confidence because they'd lost it. And in many cases, they'd lost it in childhood because of an unthinking adult. And one such lady once told me a story about how she painted a snowman and then decided to make him all multicoloured. But then an adult, I think it was one of her uncles, literally threw it in the bin in front of her and said, "That's not what snowmen are like. Snowmen are white. Here's how to draw it properly." Grabbed her arm and actually drew it for her, holding her arm. Put her off art for 40 years. She's now a really, really good ceramicist. But it took a lot to get her back into art again because all her confidence had been knocked. So one of the things I did was I got a couple of old balls and I covered them with these paint dimps, these dried bits of acrylic, and I made her a multicoloured snowman, which she loved. I also used some of this dried paint to create an abstract painting and then painted to people looking at the abstract painting. Yeah, I mean, it just seems such a waste of resources to throw this stuff in the bin, to peel it off the palette and throw it in the bin. Oh, and I once did a full-size painting, like an A3 size painting, using lots and lots of leftover bits of dried paint off my palettes, which are then painted in blues and greens and yellows. Noticed a skeleton in amongst all the bits and pieces and picked it out with white. Then I did some sharks to turn it into an underwater cave. It's quite effective, isn't it? And it's now hanging on a wall of a friend who lives in Australia. So whenever I clean one of my palettes, I always peel off all the paint, the dried paint, and I stick it in a pot. And I was looking at all these bits the other day and laying them out and thinking, it's got a kind of nasty, dried, mummified skin texture. I thought, what if I cover a book with it? So these are the kind of dried paint bits I'm talking about. This is how they peel off the palettes. They're kind of nice flexible sheets of plastic. And I've got lots of different colours here, different shapes and sizes. I quite like these round ones, which actually come out the top of paint tubes where the paint's dried around the nozzle. Might make nostrils or eyes or something like that. And yeah, as you can see, lots of little bits. So I've got pots of these, so I shall start sticking these onto the outside of a notebook. Okay, so this is kind of a test piece. I'm starting to lay out some of the paint on a piece of black card before I actually stick it down onto the book. And you'll notice I've got these teeth as well. I bought a bag of these little teeth. Can't remember now whether it was Temu or Amazon, but they were pennies. They really were, these little plastic teeth. But as you can see, when they're embedded in some paint and some glue, they'll look quite effective. I've also got some of these polystyrene balls, and I cut one of them in half to make the eyeballs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to crease these with a knife to sort of give the impression of where the eye slit is, like this, and maybe another couple of creases here and there, just to make it look a little bit more like, you know, sort of creases in the skin. But I'll make that central groove much deeper, much deeper, really push it in there, so ultimately when the eyes go on there, they will look a little bit more like eyes. Yeah, I'm kind of liking the shape. Let's stick it down onto the book cover. Okay, so I've never been a person to shirk his responsibilities, and I've never been someone who's afraid to own up to his mistakes. And basically, viewer, I made a mistake. I thought I had the video running when I was sticking all the bits on the cover, front and back of the cover of the little notebook, and I didn't. I didn't have the video running. I'm so annoyed, so I'm afraid you're going to have to make do with these 2 stills. Well, in fact, it's 3 stills, because I also started to paint the cover with a kind of fleshy liver-coloured paint, and I forgot to record that altogether. I'm not very good at this YouTube stuff, am I? But anyway, here's what it looks like so far. I've now covered the whole thing in PVA, you know, wood glue, which looks very messy, but remember it dries transparent and shiny, so it'll give it a kind of slimy, glossy sort of look. Just looks a bit weird at this stage. And I also took the opportunity to throw a few dog hairs into it, because my dogs shed hair like no one's business. And I thought, well, if we had just a few here and there, it'll just make it look even more disgusting. So we just got to wait for that to dry now to see the finished result. So here's the finished thing. Again, I can only apologise for my poor videoing, but you can see the effect you've got is really quite nasty. This is all just little bits of paint that have all been stuck together on the cover. Then, like I said, I gave it a dark brown wash with watered down brown paint, and then I highlighted certain areas, like I obviously painted the inside of the mouth a darker colour and the nostrils, and then I gave it a dry brush with a sort of pastely purpley pink, and then I coated the whole thing in PVA, just to give it that nasty shininess. But yeah, it looks kind of fleshy, doesn't it? And the other thing is it feels kind of fleshy, because there's some give in the paint, because like I said, it's acrylic, it's plastic, and it's also obviously there's the polystyrene eyeballs. And yeah, I think it looks pretty awful. And why don't you have a go yourself? As I've said on many occasions on these videos, you don't need expensive art materials to create. I mean, this is waste materials. It's a cheap notebook and paint that would have just gone in the bin. That's all it is. That's all it is. The only expense was the teeth, and like I said, that came to pennies. The more we can use the things that we throw away in society and give them a second life and repurpose them, the better it is for the planet. And it's good for your soul, it's good for your creativity as well, because there's something wonderful about looking at a bunch of disparate things and saying, I can make art with that. I just love that. It really gives me a buzz. Anyway, that's it for this particular video. I'll see you in the next one. Toodle pip, and if you've enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing, or click on some of these links to look at some of the other videos on the channel, or press the like button, or leave a comment. It would be lovely to hear from you. Any combination of those 4 things would be wonderful. Thank you very much.